Right, today I am here with Hudson and Helen Chalmers. I met Hudson through Five Romeo Romeo, who invited me to come with him here for lunch one day in the Strand, and I live just down the road in Gordons Bay. And Hudson and I became good friends. And Hudson is a third generation Rhodesian, and he worked a large part of his life. He worked as a surveyor, so he spent a lot of his life in the bush and in the bush during the war years as well. So Hudson has lived a full life and has a lot of very interesting stories. So I asked him if I prevailed upon him, twisted his arm to give us an interview, and yeah. So I hope you guys can sit back and enjoy this one.
I was brought up on the mines, and I always had a fascination for it. I went to Milton School, Milton Junior, Milton Senior, and then got very interested in electronics and joined the Rhodesian Post Office. Went to the college there for 2 years, thoroughly enjoyed it, and discovered I was colorblind. So that put the kibosh on that. So I then joined the mines, Lonro, as a learner mine official in those days. A 2-year course. I had a fantastic mine manager, very intimidating guy, Fred Adams. What I loved about Fred, he was one of these real bushmen. And he did a walk from Katuma all the way through to the Zambezi Valley, all the way past where Kabora Bassa is now. It took him about 3-4 months just walking with one of his African friends. That man, you could call him, sort of chap, and told us some fascinating stories about some of the people in the Zambezi Valley with 3 toes, climbing trees, and other tribes that actually lived literally like without a home, just loincloths and very wild. So this fascinated me. Also, Fred was a ex-Marine. He was in the war during the Second World War. He was actually on the hood when it was blown up, and he survived that.
Oh.
So he was a real character. And I remember asking him at Cirque, please, may I have some study leave for my survey certificate? So he looked at me over his glasses like this, and he said, how many hours in a day, young man? I said, 24, sir. He said, use them. So that was it. And he put me through a very intensive course, underground survey, plant, assay office. So it was a well-rounded course. And through the mining career, with Lonro, ended up as chief surveyor at Arcturus mine. It's a very dirty mine. Then I went to South Africa and got involved in aerial survey, which also fascinated me. And so initially I was a ground control surveyor that's putting down pre-marks, and then the aircraft would fly. And then I was transferred to Windhoek in Southwest Africa and worked on the plotting machines, and interestingly used the camera there. It's a big RC8 camera, and we used the Lodestar bomber. The pilot, can I mention his name? Des Plunkett, very nice, very good pilot.
Now, this is an interesting coincidence. After I left the army in the latter half of the 1970s, I met a lovely old gentleman who was a bit down on his luck and needed somewhere to stay, called Desmond Plunkett. And I said, Des, you can come stay with us. And we became really good friends. He was a lovely old man. I only found out later that he had, in fact, been in the RAF during World War II as a training pilots. And later he qualified as a bomber pilot and was posted to 218 Squadron at RAF Marham in Norfolk. On his 8th operational day, flying a Sterling heavy bomber, he was shot down over occupied Holland while on a mission to attack Cologne and Essen. And then he was arrested and taken to Stallakluft 3, where he took part in that famous thing, the Great Escape. In fact, Des told me he was number 13 out of the tunnel. I think there was about 76 of them odd escaped. And Des was one of the last ones to be captured. In fact, the first guys who were captured, 50 of them were executed by the Gestapo on orders of the Führer. And but Des hadn't been captured at that time, so he escaped execution. And I think he got as far as the Austrian border before he was captured and arrested, and then became a prisoner of the Gestapo, who kept him for some time until he was released or sent to Stalag Luft 1 on the Baltic Sea, and from there he was repatriated to England after VE Day. He then stayed in the RAF for a couple of years, and then began to work as a survey pilot, which is around about the time that Hudson Chalmers is talking about. In 1965, he and his family settled in Rhodesia. He retired from flying in 1975 and took up beekeeping. And later, in the 90s, he left Zimbabwe and went back to live in England. And in fact, he died about 20 years ago in 2002. But I just thought it was an amazing coincidence that Hudson Chalmers should bring him up this morning.
Well, he never told us much about that, but we would get into the aircraft, and my first sortie with him in Southwest Africa, 20,000 feet. He doesn't tell us how cold it's going to be, and we have to use oxygen because that lodestar leaked like a sieve. It was a ventilation. Anyway, it was a fascinating trip. He's an incredibly good pilot, and he nursed this lodestar, this old bomber, on an incredible sortie, especially in Southwest, on the Coca Veld over that very hostile terrain. And then, of course, we'd do the plotting of the maps. So when I came back to Rhodesia, I went back to Kanyamba Mine with Fred Adams. He had asked me to come back. And then I joined the Ministry of Mines as a surveyor for a while, but it was terrible, so I resigned. I broke my three. You can't work for government, any government. And fortunately, that wanky disaster happened while I was there. It's a terrible tragedy because there was a new mining engineer from England. I can't remember his name. Very, very nice guy, and he knew his coal mines. And he was telling them, because I went there to do check surveys, he was telling them they need to dampen the coal dust with chalk. I got back to Salisbury, and then we heard about this terrible explosion. 400 people killed, unnecessarily, because they didn't listen to this engineer. He was brought in especially for that. So there was a lot of finger pointing and what have you. But tragedy, and then of course we had all the rescue teams from the mines, various mines going there, and they put themselves in a huge amount of danger, but they couldn't save anybody. So what happens with the methane explosion? It's not that actually does the damage, ignites the coal dust, and then it's like a rolling fire. You can imagine like Frente. And you just can't stop it. And we went down underground. The rail tracks were bent up in a U shape. I mean, it was horrendous. And most of the bodies they couldn't recover. So the family, to try and describe the atmosphere in Wanky was impossible. I mean, so I spent a lot of time at Wanky anyway, later on surveying the area. Also surveyed the pipeline from Wanky Power Station to Sherwood in Kwekwe. 400 odd kilometers. That route, even the elephants get stuck there during the rainy season. And that's where I used to do a lot of work for Basil Creasy. You know that. Take a river episode where I was doing a huge photo control job. I was doing the control for Basil. So what we'd do is we'd have aerial photographs, 1 in 25,000. We never had those in the army. Did you guys ever get those? This was particularly interesting. It was a drought in the Decca in that time. Frequently there are droughts there, and what we'd do is we'd have photographs. We'd identify a bush or an anthill, and put a pinprick on the photograph, turn it over, make a sketch, and then we'd observe that point. We'd actually level between its four heights, because they had a thing called aerial triangulation by this stage. So we'd have about 4 guys with us carrying a staff front and back and helping with the machine. I normally carried my 30-06 rifle with me. And on this particular day, why didn't I? We were right up against it was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the Decca River, which was absolutely dry. And the grass, you get this white sort of grass, similar to what you get in Southwest Africa. Not deeply rooted, just and maponi trees, straight maponi trees, fortunately. And I was set up right next to an anthill, which was about 2 meters high, big one with a wide base. And I just observed the back staff, survey staff, and I turned the instrument round to start the front staff, and I saw the front staff without the guy falling over. And I heard the clatter behind me of the guy dropping his. And I turned round, and there was a lioness right here, 3 meters. She'd come round the corner, seen me. She got a fright, not as much of a fright as I got. And there was a maponi tree right here. Now they tell you don't run from a lion. Son, let me tell you, I was up that tree. I was up that tree like you can't believe. And I looked around, and one of the guys, there was a baobab tree about 100 meters away. He'd run up that baobab tree. The other guys were all hanging on trees as well. So anyway, I'm up this tree. So she goes around the base of the tree, stretches up. Now, you know, lions can get up trees, but they can't. They have to have branches to move up. And I'll never forget that sound that she made as I still hear it. The mouth open. I've got a picture of a similar thing which I must let you have. So anyway, I'm up the tree now. She goes around, stretches up, so I inch up further on the tree. Remember, I had a leather coat on as well. This was quite chilly. And then she moves away and she goes up on top of the anthill, the chuduri. And she's eyeing me out there, and then she's crouched. Because she's gauging whether she can get me. So, being a surveyor, I said, no, I better get higher, otherwise it won't get me. So I climbed higher, and she relaxed, went down again, around the tree, and then pushed off, I thought. So I said to the guys, okay, let's get down now. They said, you first, boss.
Where was your thing?
I'd left it in the truck. The one day that I didn't carry it with me when I needed it. Anyway, so I said, okay, so I started inching down, and she charges the tree again. So I got higher. So the one guy, Alexander, he had a greasy cap. He was a very unhygienic sort of guy. You could smell him coming from. He was sat in the back of the truck. Nice guy, though. Anyway, he said and he smoked. He smoked like. He lit his cap and threw it down to try and make a fire. And that didn't work. So anyway, we waited until I think we'd been up the tree for about until 5:30, and not sure what to do. Anyway, the lioness hadn't come back. So I inched my way down. Other guys came to group with me. It was actually Alexander was up the baobab tree. I had to knock in steel pegs as a ladder to get him down. I said to the guys, now listen, we've got 15 k's now to get back to the truck. And normally in the day, that's nothing to walk, especially when you're young and fit. And now it's getting to 6 o'clock. And I said, now, if she comes out again, don't all bombshell and run, because one of us is going to get nailed. So we're walking back, and I promise you, each one of us was eyeing the nearest tree, and if she had to come, we had a bombshell. Anyway, we got back to the truck. I dropped the guys off. They were living in a township. And I went up to the Baobab Hotel and walked into the pub. First thing I wanted to be in there. Guys, can I swear? Guys looking at me, what the fuck happened to you, Chalmers? I said, I was chased up a tree by a lioness. And they all hosed themselves. So to tell the story, and of course I didn't pay for a beer. Then next morning I phoned Basil and I said, look, there's been a little bit of a hitch. But I'm okay, I told him the story. He pisses himself. And he said, Hudson, that encounter with the king of beasts or queen of beasts is going to live with you forever. So I said, thanks, Basil. Anyway, he said he looked forward to hearing the full story. So I got hold of the ranger, Arthur Tibbets. I don't know if you know him.
Yeah.
He was at school with me.
I know.
Yeah. Anyway, so he mocks me as well, of course. We go there, and he said, how big was this lioness? I said, about that big. Lioness is actually quite tall. And when they're close up, they're very big. Hannes will tell you that. And he said, she got more of a fright than you. I said, just have a look at my undies, Arthur. But he said, no, she had cubs around there. That's why she was so aggressive. So he actually tracked and found where the cubs were, and it wasn't far from where I was working. Look, I just loved that area. The interesting thing is we could walk past the pride of lions that because there's quite a lot of game around, even though there was a drought. A lot of eland, a lot of warthog, but the warthog were actually dying during the drought, and they used to edge themselves into an anthill, into a chiduli, the whole. Yeah. And we come across quite a few dead. We used to take the tusks and make knives with them. And on this one occasion, we were still doing Basil's job. I had a little in the belly guy, John Duby. He was abducted eventually by the terrorists. Unfortunately, and I heard that from his family. I said to him, John, just go and put. This is a huge tusker. I mean, I've never seen tusks that big. This thing was lying in there, and it was just looked as though it was dead. And so John goes up, grabs the tusk on the one side, and the other guy grabs it on the pull, and this thing comes alive. And you should have seen. John took off like you can't believe. And this thing was off him. Anyway, I had my 30 So I shot good meat, water, good meat. So that was the episode at Wanky. Parker Hale. Lovely with the scope. Beautiful weapon. And you had to be careful what ammo you used. I'd used the Canadian ammo. And, you zero with that, and then you must stay with that Canadian ammo. Because if you used anything else, you just didn't perform. But, I mean, you could take, I was a good shot. Even in the army, I was a very good shot, which is useful. Then I did the Wanky Sherwood job, which was really, really tough. Probably the second most tough job. But I reveled in those sort of things. I took these jobs. Nobody else would take them. It's a power line survey from Wanky to Sherwood and Quick. It's 450 odd kilometers. So what we had to do is we had to find angle points. Then we do a topographical survey in between tower positions. And in those days we didn't have all the electronics, so it was tough work. Virgin line, yeah. So it was thick bush. And then there's that hot springs on the way there between Sherwood and Quick. I can't remember quite where it was. But sort of non-existent roads, so the Land Rover battled, and then the rains just couldn't move. And of course, baobab trees, a lot of them. And Sod's Law would always state there'd be a baobab tree in your line of sight. The route that Zesso or Escom, what do they call them in those days? Rhodesia. We chopped this baobab tree down, which one didn't enjoy doing, but anyway. And then you find it's not actually online, it's Sod's Law. And fascinating. I had a camp on the corner of the turnoff to Det on the main road there. I had a camp just there. There's a huge tree, and I set up my camp there. We always had a very nice camp. And one occasion we chopped down this huge mapani tree. They get very big there. And there was an eagle owl fell out, baby, out of the nest. So I took that as a fierce little bugger, bit the hell out of me. So I put a sock over him, took him back to camp. And then people used to kill these nightjars on the main road. Just skip the nightjars as to feed him. I don't know what it was. And every time I sat on this wooden table that I'd made out of my pony, and he'd sit there like it, and I'd approach him, and he'd go back like this, screech. And then I'd give him the food he'd eat. But he never got tame. And he always tried to escape. Then there were all the weavers in the tree above, and I hated this thing. So I used to dive bomb him. And he used to duck. So he got into the habit of ducking all the time. But unfortunately, he grew enough and he moved off. But it was a good experience. Then probably the war when I was starting to, I was registered for national service when I was 16, I think it was. But I was exempt. So because I was at the college, I was exempt from call-up. And then during the period as a learner official, I was exempt. And my manager was actually chairman of the exemption board. So he said, your time will come. Because I was very keen on the military. I loved the military. I was a sea cadet at Milton. Interesting, there was no boat. My cousin, Des Chalmers, he was a major in RIR territory. Our family was very military and orientated. Anyway, so during that time we forgot about it, never called up. And then the war started impacting on our lives, obviously. And I was commissioned to survey relay stations for the army. First one was at Mount Thackeray in just west of Mount Darwin, about 40 k's. I was about to join a convoy at that time. I think it was about landmines were really becoming quite favourable. And we were in a convoy with, there was an RL in front of me. I was in my Land Rover, and I was taking a young farmer's daughter, going to drop her off at the farm near Mount Thackeray, in fact. She asked for a lift. And there was an RL in front of us with SAP guys on it. SAP guys, there was a RLI in front of them, fortunately. And the truck, back left wheel hit a landmine. Gave me a hell of a fright, and the young girl. And it was also an ambush, a P truck. I was just behind it.
Right.
So I saw this, see this, you see, you don't hear it, you see the wheel shoot. Yeah, and then you hear the sound, and then the dirt starts falling down, and then you hear the gunfire. So I pulled the girl out of the car, put her under the truck, and I had my 30-06, and I was shooting. I don't know what the hell I was shooting at. I couldn't see anything. I had to do something. Fortunately, the RLI guys were in the truck in front. They attacked the position and sorted the terrorists out. But it was an introduction to the war. Then I did a lot of work in the Rasamba, Rashinga roads, and landmines. I mean, I'd see construction trucks, boom, found a landmine. D8 bulldozers found a landmine. They didn't suffer too much. But it was like almost a daily occurrence, you know. we had, I think, RH, Rhodesian Holding Unit guys, coloured guys, I think, as escort. I don't think they were much good. Anyway, we didn't seem to worry too much because we were in a construction area. But, interesting. And then I got a big job. Nobody else wanted it in the Nyani Gorge. That is from the Zambezi Valley, about 15 kilometers up the gorge, the Nyani River. The Kachuta TTL was just to the east of it, and that's where the Kachuta Trail was, which was an incursion route, apparently. Found that out after. So anyway, I planned a survey, and it was really rugged territory, as you well know, the escarpment. So it was very clever. So I hired a bell chopper, the one like a glass dome, and we had sacks of water, but you can't drink that Nyani water, believe it or not. It's got all sorts of detergents. I had these big water sacks, anyway, plastic things, very tough, valve on it. We put those on the skids and food drops and cement, because we had to build beacons. So this was the idea, to be efficient. So I selected points on the map with this. So I was also a reserve chopper pilot for the RAF. Very good pilot. But this bell, it's got that like almost motorcycle engine, and makes a hell of a racket. So I dropped these food drops off. I think there were 5 points I used right up to the top end. And I said, that's fine, we're ready. Went back to Salisbury, had an SSB radio. Helen was living in Rua in a nice big farmhouse there. She used to see all the choppers going overhead. Sometimes with body bags, Helen? They're saying that. Anyway, so now we all ready, Land Rover, everything, down we go. And we start our first sortie, get to the first food drop, and we're going to make a camp there. And the thing's been destroyed, slashed, all the food taken, and there's a note. The big bags, they'd slashed those and taken all the bully beef and all that and cut open the cement bags and emptied them. And there was a note there from a guy called Hudson. He said, "We know you're in this area." He was a terrorist. "Know you're in this area, but we're not going to touch you because we know you're building something that we're going to use when we take over." That's not nice. I'm not sure what he was. Anyway, he wrote very well. So I said, well, I better go and report this. So we went back we used hunting camp A at just between Mashumbi pools and Mushinga Indy pools. Beautiful pools. You see the hippos in there with the babies on there. absolutely crystal clear. Anyway, so I went and there was a sub-police station there. And then I was told to go back to Salisbury and discuss it with the Army. So I went back there to KG6. I remember who I discussed it with. And they gave me an RAR sergeant, I don't know, sergeant, I don't know. Very, very nice guy. And a guy from Part 2, his escort. So I must go back. They gave him a TR-48 radio, the RAR guy. And we had to get sit reps before we went into the gorge, which the RAR guy, this guy was brilliant, and his bushcraft, and I learned a lot from him. And they took me to the range, introduced me to the FN, which I just loved. So to do instinctive shooting, the whole thing, so that I wouldn't be a hindrance to them in case of a problem. I was a good shot, fortunately. So now off we went. Now we had to use bearers because all the food things shot. So I had about 15 bearers to carry all the stuff in on the first sortie, to get to the various. Because the beacons had to be on top of the gourmets. So lots of heavy climbing, tough terrain. And on the maps, the 50,000 maps, you can't see all the ravines. So you plan a route, and then, oh my goodness. So anyway, so we heading off now with our first sortie, and we've got the RAR guy in the front. Had the sit rep. We were all clear. There was nothing near us, and of course, POM-ups or said, "Don't go anywhere near. These guys are doing a survey." Just as we're getting to the mouth of the gorge, ambushed. So I hit the deck, following the RA, what this guy said, if there's any fire, just hit the deck, leave it to me. And he said, okay, Hudson, it's friendly fire, it's MAG. Shouldn't be there, but it's an MAG. So he went behind him, and I got there, but this guy was brilliant, and he held him up, SAP, 10 kilometers out of position. The bearers all fucked off at a high rate. Never found him.
With all the kids.
No, they dropped it. Dropped it and took off, as long leg. And there was a chief Chitsunga, who was near there. There's a mission there as well. And those guys were very friendly to the terrorists, by the way. Anyway, he managed to get us a few more bearers and had to pay him with beer, lots of beer. But he was a bad guy. He was not a good guy. Anyway, so we into the survey. It was very tough. And I was on the SSB to Helen every night when we could get comms. Then the rain started, so now we in these almost climbing these steep things. Ponchos freezing, how cold it gets, and then how steam it gets when the sun comes out. So now we had about 3 more observations to do before we were finished. Jokingly, I said to Helen on the radio, I said, this is really tough. If only I had a couple of choppers, I could clap this job in 2 days. And I left it at that. So she phones the double RAF. Says, my husband needs 2 choppers, or needs a chopper. I think the guy was sarcastic and said, you sure you don't want 2? They said, yeah, that's fine. Can you believe it? Only in Rhodesia.
Yeah.
So where is he? Oh, he's hunting camp 8. That was the Tsetse camp, hunting camp 8. So they had the lock stats. Next day, 2 choppers arrived. Alouettes, complete with gunners, everything. Okay, guys, what do you want? What do you want us to do? So they uplifted us to the various points, did the observation. I mean, it was just fantastic. And my love for Alouettes started, and the love for my wife really increased dramatically. But you couldn't do that anywhere else, except Rhodesia. They'd drop us off in places that I thought he's not going to be able to land. And he'd drop it down gently and we'd get out. And he said, how long are you going to be? I said, be an hour. He said, I'll be back. Come pick us up and move us. So we had 2 telerometers, electronics, which could measure 20 kilometers at a time. And you had voice over on it as well. So these 2 guys worked in tandem, and so they did them a very fond farewell. And now we'd finished the job, but now it was raining, and those rivers were coming down. So there's 2 Land Rovers, okay, mine and Dieter Laniger, the Part 2 guy. So how are we going to get out now? Because all these rivers are just raging. So I said, no worries. He said, we'll get to where the river stalls a little bit, and we'll take the Land Rovers across. I said, I'm not putting my Land Rover in there. He said, no. So he had a huge tarpaulin. If I hadn't seen this, I wouldn't have believed. And when I related the experience, nobody believed me. So what he does, he gets the guys holding the tarpaulin up, and he runs his Land Rover in, and you walk it across, like a boat. So I said, you first, you see. And then my Land Rover, so we all across, and we did another 2 rivers like that. And as I say, when I related that story, nobody believed me. But I then found a clip of the RLI doing exactly that with the Land Rover. And I said, look, see? Anyway, so that was another learning experience. So, yeah, that was probably the toughest job that I've had. I enjoyed it. It was a challenge. And then, as you know, the war hotted up. I went to the police reserve and I said, well, how about me joining you? They said, no, we can put you into the general service unit, which I just. And Ian Tilley, the section officer, did our training. Very good. Went to Nkama Barracks. We did the 6-week course there with jungle lane, all of that. Very intensive, range work. And then we went operational. We did patrols, OPs, what have you. Then they whipped us off that and sent us down to Rhodesia. They took the guard force off there, and then we were walking 5Ks, 2 of us patrolling the rail. Terrible, I just couldn't take it. The radio and 2 of you walking. What are we going to do? Really? Look, really? So after that one call-off, I said, that's it. I can't do that anymore. So I had a friend of mine who ran the call-ups, Simon, I can't remember his surname, with the computer. I said, Simon, you've got to get me out of here. So he said, all I can do is get you into one PSYOPs, as I called it at the time. It wasn't one POU. I had to have an interview with Captain Delta. Anyway, so they said, okay, you can come in. And they sent me to Sonoya, attached to the jock there at 5th Bat. That's where I met Colonel Darrell Van Zyl. We didn't do any of that psychological work. We did, again, OPs. But then I was integrated with 5th Bat. I always said to Martin, I don't know how we never crossed paths, but he had a different.
Right.
Right. So the rest of the time I was with 5th Bat, operating from Sonoya. They put us up to Samba once with the Dakota. That was a terrible experience. I enjoyed it, but it was, hill hopping, and the guys started getting sick. Guys in the tail, the tail was, and then it just spreads through the whole thing of the sting. Anyway, Samba was not such a nice place. We were put on OPs, ambushes. There was curfew there, and landmines. Pregnant women, so-called, were carrying these things in. We were told that if you see them, shoot them. Fortunately, I never had to do that. And then they put us in. It wasn't a bookie. They gave us the metal detector, clear an area for mines. And we had Jackie Dupree. I don't know if you remember. He's a Rhodesian cricketer. Just one incident there at the base camp. There was a pit where they chucked all the garbage and whatever. There was one bright spark on the bun. He wanted to get rid of the smell, so he got 5 litres of petrol, poured it in, went over, struck a match, missing a burnt his eyebrows off, burnt his head. Anyway, he learned his lesson, I presume. So then it was Darrell Van Zyl started the training troop with Captain Bob Lyons. We operated from Nkoma. So the guys that were called up now for 5th Bat, they do a refresher course. So we just do jungle lane and a couple of days, and then they would deploy that thing out. And then they started pulling in the guys that had dodged the national service for years, 40-year-old, 50-year-old, straight out of the chairs, brought them to us for 6 weeks training. So the thin guys came out very fit and the fat guys came out skinny. The wives didn't recognize. But I really enjoyed that training. Bob Lyons, he was from Sandhurst. So he was in SAS UK, and then he was SAS in Rhodesia. RLI, then SAS. Big guy with somebody had obviously whacked his nose with something. He insisted that we deploy with each intake. So we would deploy with them to the operational area. He said, if you've been any good at training, then let's put it to the test.
So lots of patrolling and fleeting contacts. One you had with Muzareva's militia at Ruzawi.
During that election.
Right.
Yeah, so what they did is they dumped a whole lot of guys together, because a lot of guys had left the country, especially like from 5th Beta, a lot of guys had left. So had a mishmash of people that you'd never seen before. So I was the stick leader with 4 guys at Zoe, and then we had a patrol, and then they had these terrorists, obvious, around the intimidating people. What was it? Ravana.
Mm.
Ravana. Two of the people. Yeah. So we were on patrol. It's a fairly dense bush there, and opened fire. These people opened fire. Of course, we retaliated, and I had the. So we reported it, and they said, "Oh, we shouldn't have returned fire." I said, "Excuse me, what do you do?" Of course, you returned fire. We didn't know who they were. You know, they had AKs as well. Mostly on our OPs, if we spotted, we'd observe villages, and then if we saw any activity, then we'd call it in. Generally, we weren't told to engage, even on patrol. If we saw something, we were told, because we were older, I was sort of 30 years old, still very fit at the time. One clandestine where they run the tracks at night, you debus at night when the convoy's going. And, you know, on the Oro, they got that moon step on it, the tailgate down, so I was debussing this foot got caught. And I was dragged for about 100 meters before they stopped. So that was compromise anyway, because I was yelling and the guys were yelling. And then my leg was in plaster for about 6 months. So they sent me to KG6 on guard duty. That's a horrible job. I mean, it's so boring. So then, yeah, all of us know what happened in '79. We were told that I was sent with some guys to Enterprise Road and what is that road, Helen? Near the Park Lane? Right in the corner there, sandbags. Yeah, and if you see these guys coming, take them out. That's when Mugabe was going to come. We were told that independence wasn't going to happen or something. So there we were, MAG, Bren gun, you know, converted one of the 762 magazine. And we were told, okay, guys, go home. So we did. Yeah. That was the end of it, finished.